You can feel the heat before it even touches your skin. A slow, dry burn, right at the fingertips. A small, controlled wildfire held between them. You pull the smoke into your mouth first, a warm and bitter cloud, and then deeper. You feel it hit the back of your throat, a distinct, almost dusty scratch. Then the faint, spreading warmth in your chest. And finally, the slow, steadying exhale, a plume of gray that hangs in the air, dissolving the moment into something else. That scratch in your throat, that warmth in your lungs, your body has a memory for it, a deep, cellular memory. This isn't about the cigarette, the vape, the cigar. It's about the smoke itself. Your nervous system knows this ancient signal. It responds to it on a level far older than any package warning or social habit. It's a conversation between your physiology and a flame, a dialogue that started in shadows so deep our own origin story was still being written. But for over 99% of human history, this wasn't a vice. It wasn't a break or a rebellion or a way to pass the time. For your ancestors, it was a matter of life and death. And the story of how smoke first entered the human body is not a story of weakness or a discovery of pleasure. It is a story of staring into the dark, feeling a deeper chill than any winter, and making a choice that would rewire our species from the inside out. The world they lived in was not a grand wilderness, but a tightening knot of cold. We're in the grip of a glacial maximum, a time when ice sheets crawled down continents. Your ancestors are not living in some sun-drenched savanna. They are clinging to the edges of survival, huddled in caves and simple shelters. The cold is a physical predator. It leaches heat from your body faster than you can make it. It stiffens hands, makes tools slip, turns a minor cut into a death sentence. And then, as the sun vanishes, comes the other predator, the dark. Not the soft dark of a modern bedroom, but a total, consuming blackness, pressing in from the mouth of the cave. In that darkness, every rustle is a threat. The scuff of a paw on stone, the low huff of a breath just outside the firelight. Your band is maybe 25 people. Every single one of them is irreplaceable. If you lose one hunter to an infection from the cold, if a child is taken in the night, the entire group teeters on the edge. Your existence, right now, reading this, depends on an unbroken chain of survival through nights like these. And in the middle of this, they had fire. They had mastered it. It was heat. It was light. It was protection. It cooked their food, making more calories available, shaping their very jaws and guts. They gathered around it, its flickering light dancing on their faces, pushing the absolute dark back a few precious feet. But fire is also smoke. It stings the eyes. It catches in the throat and triggers coughing. In an enclosed space like a cave or a hut, it can become a choking hazard. Every instinct in an animal body says to avoid it, to seek clean air. So the question is not when they first breathed smoke. They would have breathed it accidentally, constantly, tending those life-giving flames. The real, breathtaking question is, when did they stop avoiding it? When did they take that irritating, choking, toxic byproduct of their most important tool and deliberately pull it deeper? When did they go from enduring smoke to inviting it in? This is the hinge of the story. Because if even one of your direct ancestors had not made that counterintuitive leap, had not overridden a fundamental survival instinct, you almost certainly would not be here. The first clues are not in pipes or bowls. They are in the body itself, in the plants. Long before any device was made to inhale smoke, humans were breathing in the medicine of the world around them through a much simpler, more profound method. They were sleeping on it. They were living in it. Walk into one of those ancient shelters. The air is thick, not just with wood smoke, but with the scent of burning greenery. Archaeologists sifting through the ashes of campfires from tens of thousands of years ago don't just find charcoal from dry wood. They find the remains of specific leaves, barks, and herbs. Plants like wormwood, lavender, and camphor. Plants with pungent, penetrating smells. Plants we now know are powerful insect repellents, mild analgesics, anti-inflammatories. They weren't just thrown on the fire for fun. This was deliberate. They were fumigating their homes. A mother lays her child down on a bed of soft grasses near the back of the shelter. The child is feverish, fitful, covered in bites from the ticks and mosquitoes that thrive in the damp. The mother gathers bundles of silvery wormwood and places them on the low, smoldering fire at the shelter's center. A sharp, clean, almost medicinal smoke begins to unfurl, filling the space. It drives the biting insects out into the night. And as the child breathes in that smoke-laden air, hour after hour, the compounds in it begin to work. The fever might ease. The irritation from the bites might dull. The smoke was a canopy, a protective atmosphere. Everyone in that shelter was breathing a low, continuous dose of phytomedicine. Their lungs were the first delivery system. This was the gateway. The body was learning. The nervous system was beginning to associate that specific, herb-laden smoke with relief, with safety, with the cessation of itching and the lowering of fever. The line between air and treatment was blurring right inside their own chests. But fumigation was a passive, ambient thing. You breathed what was in the air. The leap to actively drawing smoke into your body for a targeted purpose. That required a new kind of desperation and a new kind of observation. It came from watching the world. A wounded animal, limping into a clearing where certain aromatic plants smoldered after a lightning strike, would emerge seeming less agitated. They must have seen it. They themselves would have knelt over a fire to blow on it, to coax it to life, and gotten a faceful of smoke from a particular resinous branch. And later, the headache that had plagued them since morning was gone. The connection, over generations, became unavoidable. Specific smokes had specific effects. So they began to experiment, not in a lab, but in the most direct way possible. They would place a handful of dried leaves on a hot stone next to the fire, or directly onto embers, and then lean close. They wouldn't just breathe the ambient air. They would use their hands to cup the smoke, to funnel it toward their face. They would open their mouth and draw it in, directing it at a headache, at a stuffed nose, at the pain in a joint. This was the birth of inhalation therapy. The first smoking was likely medicinal, targeted, and crude. It was a way to get the healing power of a plant into the bloodstream, faster than chewing it or making a tea. It went straight to the lungs, and from there, straight to the head, to the pain. And it worked. For the aches of a life spent hunting and gathering. For the congestion of living in damp, smoky places. For the unrelenting anxiety of existing in a world full of teeth and claws. Smoke from certain plants didn't just treat physical pain. It altered the state of the mind. It brought calm. It brought a momentary reprieve from the crushing weight of vigilance. But that relief came with a cost. Every breath of that healing smoke was also a breath of toxins, of irritants, of tiny particles scarring the delicate tissues of the lungs. The body protested. It coughed. It produced mucus to trap the invaders. In the short term, for a severe pain or a raging infection, the trade-off was worth it. But over a lifetime, the lungs of those ancestors would have been damaged, scarred, aged before their time. So why did the practice not just continue, but become embedded in cultures across the globe? Why would natural selection not weed out the individuals who deliberately inhaled poison? Because here is the counterintuitive twist, the biological secret that makes sense of the madness. The damage was the point, but not for the reason you think. Your body's response to smoke isn't an error. It's a calculated alarm, one of the oldest defense systems you have. When smoke hits your lungs, your immune system doesn't just see a toxin. It sees the signature of something far more dangerous, wildfire. And a wildfire means displacement, crisis, and the sudden, terrifying presence of countless new pathogens from burned landscapes and fleeing animals. Your immune system's reaction to smoke is a preemptive strike. It ramps up inflammation, mobilizes white blood cells, and primes your defenses for an onslaught of infection it expects to come. For your ancestors, breathing a little smoke from a controlled fire was like a daily drill, a live-fire exercise that kept their immune troops on high alert. The minor, chronic damage from the smoke kept their healing and repair mechanisms constantly tuned and ready. In a world where a simple infected thorn could kill you, a slightly overactive, smoke-primed immune system was a survival advantage. It meant you healed faster from real wounds. You fought off real infections more aggressively. The smoke was a teacher. It taught the body vigilance, and the most powerful lesson was happening not in the lungs, but in the brain. That calm, that quieting of fear you feel when the smoke hits your bloodstream, that is not a side effect. It is the core of the contract. It was the slow, grinding terror of uncertainty, the not knowing. Is there enough food? Will the cold break? Is that sound in the dark getting closer? This kind of chronic stress is crippling. It burns energy, shuts down digestion, erodes the ability to think ahead. A band paralyzed by collective anxiety doesn't innovate. It just survives, poorly. Now, lean into that scene in the shelter again. The herb-laden smoke coils upward. You draw it in. Within minutes, the chemical compounds, whether from lavender, cannabis, or tobacco, cross into your brain. They bind to receptors. And they do one profound thing. They lower the volume on that background static of dread. They create a narrow window of mental quiet. In that window, something miraculous could happen. The hunter, his muscles aching from the chase, could sit still. The toolmaker could focus on a single seam of flint for an hour, without his mind jumping at every sound. The storyteller could weave a tale that stretched beyond tomorrow, because for a moment, tomorrow felt less terrifying. Smoke didn't just ease physical pain. It created the psychological conditions for culture. It allowed for patience, for focus, for the deep social bonding that comes from sitting in a shared, tranquil silence. It turned a defensive huddle around a fire into a council. The evidence for this is not just in the ashes of campfires, but in the artifacts that appear alongside them. Take the water pipe. Most ancient pipes found by archaeologists aren't for dry leaf. They are water pipes, designed to cool and filter smoke. The oldest known, found in Ethiopia, dates back over 1,000 years. But the design is so sophisticated, so optimized for smooth inhalation, that it hints at a much longer history of experimentation with comfort. This wasn't just about getting a substance into the body. It was about making the experience sustainable, tolerable, a regular part of life. They were engineering a better delivery system for a tool they had come to depend on. Then there are the mummies. The well-preserved remains of the ancient world tell a silent story. Hair samples from Egyptian mummies show traces of nicotine, despite tobacco being a New World plant. How? Because they were using other, similar plants, maybe henbane or blue lotus, in the same way. Residue analysis from pipes across Eurasia and the Americas reveals a pharmacopoeia of smoked plants. Cannabis in the steppes of China 2,500 years ago, tobacco in the Americas over 3,000 years ago, and likely a host of other regional plants whose psychoactive compounds have long since faded from the material record. This was not a random vice popping up in isolated pockets. It was a widespread, parallel discovery. Wherever humans and fire and stress coexisted, we seem to have independently found the same solution: breathe the smoke, quiet the mind, prime the body. But perhaps the most compelling proof is in the genes. Recent studies of human DNA have identified subtle selection pressures on genes related to nicotine metabolism. In some populations, versions of these genes that allow for more efficient processing of the compounds in smoke became more common. This is evolution whispering. It doesn't mean smoking was healthy. It means that, in certain environments, may have had a slight edge. They could cooperate better, plan better, endure the unendurable a little longer. Their social groups may have been more cohesive. And in a species where social survival is everything, that slight edge was enough to be written into the blueprint. So the scratch in your throat today is an echo of that ancient bargain. Your body remembers the drill. It feels the irritant and begins to mobilize, turning on ancient pathways of defense and repair. Your brain remembers the signal. It feels the compounds and whispers. The threat is past. You can stand down now. The relaxation that follows a deep drag is physiological, deeply programmed. It is your nervous system discharging a tension it was built to hold. In response to a signal it was trained to recognize over 100,000 winters. This is why quitting is so notoriously, brutally difficult. It's not just about a chemical addiction. It's about unlearning a biological ritual. You are fighting a tradition woven into your cells. A tradition that once told your ancestors they were safe, that the tribe was together, that the mind could rest while the fire kept watch. When you crave that smoke, you are not craving a modern poison. You are craving the end of an ancient alarm. You are longing for the quiet after the drill. Of course, the modern reality is a grotesque exaggeration of this ancient pact. The concentrated, additive-laden smoke of today delivers a shock to the system. With none of the context, none of the community, none of the medicinal plant selection. It triggers the old defenses without purpose, like pulling a fire alarm every hour. The result is not a tuned immune system, but a battered one. Not a quiet mind, but a dependent one. The tool has become a weapon, but we miss the point if we blame the original instinct. The instinct wasn't to self-destruct. It was to survive a world that was constantly trying to break you, from the outside in and the inside out. The next time you see that plume of gray dissolve into the air, understand what you are really seeing. It is the ghost of 1,000 campfires, of a mother nursing a child in a haze of insect-repelling smoke, of a shaman drawing a focused breath to find a vision for the tribe, of hunters sitting in silent solidarity as the stars turned overhead. It is the breath that held anxiety at bay long enough to imagine a future. That future is you. The very fact that you are here, that your line endured the dark, and the cold, and the fear, means that somewhere, deep in your past, someone learned the strange, costly, vital art of breathing in the thing that was meant to choke them, and found in it a moment of peace strong enough to go on.